with a Tulsa pastor charged with raping his own daughter. And tonight she tells us coming forward is key to her recovery.
Pastor B.M. Bailey Sr. was a staple of the North Tulsa community, but now he's in the Tulsa County Jail, accused of numerous charges, including first-degree rape and incest. I'm Braden Bates. Harmony Oates is his daughter. She's trying to rebuild what she says was taken from her starting when she was just in the 6th grade. She was ready to share her story, sitting down with me, telling me her message to those living in the shadow.
It feels like I'm not in the shadows anymore. Think of a 13-year-old girl confused about who her true love is because her dad is saying, I'm your boyfriend.
Pastor Bailey's position as a community leader was something that challenged Oates.
I knew how to set a boundary, but whenever he's your father and whenever he's a pastor and whenever he has this authority and he has a record, it's like, you say no, but what does your no mean?
She says she was alone, suffering in silence as her father inappropriately touched her.
He would pray over me at first, but he would do a lot of touching while he was praying.
She says the years of manipulating made her ask questions.
The thing is, whenever I was a kid, I separated my dad from who he was. I had to. That's the only way I survived. I would call him my best friend, only to hide the reality of what I was living.
She tells me she first told her husband, an older brother, then had the difficult conversation with her mom. Now she's taking his alleged sexual abuse public.
Coming out of the darkness by speaking out makes you a survivor. That's what I would say.
She says she hopes others feel empowered to speak out. In her recovery, she's rediscovering God, separate from her father.
I'm learning on trusting God more, and I know He has me, and He has every other victim, and I know that He has been guiding me through this whole journey. And I know He will comfort me like a father, even though my dad did not.
Pastor Bailey is charged with 2 counts of first-degree rape.
What happens when the person you trust most becomes your greatest fear? When the man who preaches salvation is hiding a sin so dark it shatters everything you thought you knew about him and yourself? In Tulsa, Oklahoma, a city where faith isn't just practiced, it's lived, this question became all too real. Tulsa is a place where the church isn't just a building, it's the heartbeat of the community. Families gather here for weddings, funerals, and Sunday sermons that promise hope in troubled times. And no one embodied that hope more than Pastor Bertheophilus Morris Bailey. Known simply as Pastor Bailey to his flock, he was the kind of leader people admired. Charismatic, compassionate, unshakable. His booming voice could fill a room with both conviction and comfort, leaving congregants feeling like they'd been touched by something divine. But behind closed doors, something sinister lurked, something unimaginable. Her name is Harmony Oates. She's 25 years old, bright-eyed and brave, but not without scars. For nearly a decade, Harmony kept a secret so heavy it nearly broke her. A secret she finally decided to share, not just with friends or family, but with the world. It started when she was in 6th grade. Her father, the same man who stood at the pulpit every Sunday, preaching love and forgiveness, began abusing her, not once, not twice, but over and over again, for years. How do you reconcile the image of a loving father with the monster hiding in plain sight? How does someone find the courage to speak up when the person hurting them holds so much power? Not just over their life, but over an entire community. For Harmony, breaking her silence wasn't just about seeking justice. It was about survival, about reclaiming her voice after years of being silenced. And when she finally did come forward, it sent shockwaves through Tulsa and beyond. This is the story of how one woman's bravery exposed a hidden darkness, of how a city grappled with betrayal, and of how the truth can be both devastating and liberating. Because sometimes the people we least expect to fall are the ones standing on the thinnest ice. Welcome to Fatal Fame, where all our stories are based on true crimes. Please support us by subscribing to this channel and clicking the notification bell icon so you don't miss any of our latest stories. Have you ever met someone who just seems perfect? Someone whose smile lights up a room, whose words carry weight, and whose presence makes you feel like everything might actually be okay? That was Theophilus Maurice Bailey, or Pastor Bailey, as most people called him. But here's the thing about perfection. It's almost always an illusion. And sometimes, behind the brightest smiles and the loudest sermons, there's a shadow waiting to come into the light. To understand how this man, a pastor beloved by so many, became the center of one of Tulsa's darkest scandals, we need to go back to the beginning. Theophilus Maurice Bailey wasn't born into privilege or fame. He grew up in a modest family in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a city where faith has always been woven into the fabric of daily life. From a young age, he showed a knack for leadership. Friends remember him as the kid who could rally everyone together, whether it was organizing neighborhood games or leading prayer circles at youth group. As he got older, his passion for ministry only deepened. He climbed the ranks of Christian leadership with determination, earning respect not just for his knowledge of Scripture, but for his ability to connect with people. By the time he became the pastor of St. Andrew Christian Church, he had built a reputation as a man of God, a shepherd to his flock, guiding them through life's storms with wisdom and grace. And oh, what a flock it was! If you've ever stepped foot inside St. Andrew Christian Church, you know it's more than just a place of worship. It's a community hub, a sanctuary where people gather not only to pray, but to serve. Food drives, clothing donations, mentorship programs. It seemed like every week brought a new opportunity to give back. Under Bailey's leadership, the church flourished. Membership grew. People from all walks of life flocked to hear his sermons, which were equal parts fiery and heartfelt. He had a way of making even the most skeptical person believe they could change their lives for the better. But it wasn't just his charisma that drew people in, it was his family. Let's talk about the Baileys for a moment. If you didn't already admire Pastor Bailey, meeting his family would seal the deal. They were the picture, perfect Christian household. The kind pastors use as examples in their sermons. Married for decades, Bailey and his wife were pillars of stability. Their kids, bright, polite, and deeply involved in church activities, were often praised as role models. Harmony Oates, Bailey's daughter, was especially active in the church community. She sang in the choir, helped organize fundraisers, and even led Bible studies for younger members. To outsiders, she seemed like any other happy, well-adjusted young woman. But looks can be deceiving, can't they? Think about it for a second. How many times have we looked at someone's polished exterior and assumed their insides matched? We see success, happiness, faith, and we stop asking questions. After all, why would we doubt someone who gives so much to others? Who spends hours counseling the brokenhearted, feeding the hungry, and praying over the sick? But here's the uncomfortable truth. Predators don't wear signs. They don't announce themselves. Instead, they hide in plain sight, using trust and authority to mask their intentions. For years, no one questioned Pastor Bailey. Not his congregation, not his colleagues, and certainly not his family. Why would they? He was, after all, a man of God. Looking back, it's easy to wonder, were there signs, whispers, moments that didn't quite add up, but were dismissed because, well, it was Pastor Bailey? Or was he really that good at hiding the darkness beneath his carefully crafted image? Because make no mistake, that darkness existed. And when it finally came to light, it shattered more than just one family. It shook an entire community to its core. Before we move forward, take a moment to think about your own life. Is there someone you've placed on a pedestal, someone you trust without question because they seem too good to harm anyone? Now ask yourself this: what if you're wrong? Because sometimes the people we least expect to hurt us are the ones holding the sharpest knives. Let's take a moment to really sit with Harmony Oates, not as a victim, but as a person. Because before she became the brave woman who stepped forward to expose years of unimaginable pain, she was just a little girl trying to make sense of a world that felt increasingly confusing and unsafe. Picture this: 6th grade. A time when most kids are figuring out who they are, maybe joining sports teams, learning to play an instrument, or giggling over crushes at school. For Harmony, though, life was far from carefree. Behind closed doors, her father, the man everyone admired, was already laying the foundation for a nightmare she'd carry for years. At first it started subtly: words. Criticism disguised as concern. Little comments meant to chip away at her confidence until she began doubting herself. Then came the manipulation. Distinct situations, so she felt responsible, like somehow she had done something wrong. By the time the abuse escalated, Harmony was trapped in a cycle of fear and confusion, unsure how to escape or even if escape was possible. Now imagine being told by your own father, not just any father, but a pastor, that what's happening is normal, that it's part of God's plan, that you're special because you've been chosen to endure this test. Imagine hearing those words week after week, year after year, while sitting in church pews, listening to him preach about love, forgiveness, and righteousness. It's hard to wrap our minds around, isn't it? But that was Harmony's reality. Her abuser wasn't just a parent. He was a spiritual leader who wielded religion like a weapon. He used scripture to justify his actions, quoting verses about obedience and submission, framing himself as someone acting on divine authority. For Harmony, faith, which should have been a source of comfort, became tainted. How do you reconcile the God of love you hear about on Sundays with the horrors happening in your own home? How do you pray for guidance when the person hurting you claims to speak for God? And yet, despite all of this, Harmony found ways to survive. She clung to small moments of light, a kind teacher, a supportive friend, a song that made her feel less alone. These tiny sparks of hope kept her going, even when everything else seemed dark. But survival came at a cost. The emotional scars ran deep. Anxiety became her constant companion. Depression whispered lies in her ear, telling her she wasn't good enough, strong enough, worthy enough. And guilt, oh the guilt, followed her everywhere, a shadow she couldn't shake. Still, somewhere inside her, a quiet voice refused to stay silent forever. As Harmony grew older, she began questioning the narrative her father had forced upon her. Was this really God's will? Or was it just a lie, a carefully constructed trap designed to keep her trapped? The journey towards speaking out wasn't easy. It took years of untangling the web of manipulation, of relearning what trust and safety truly meant. Along the way, she leaned on people who believed in her, friends, counselors, advocates, who reminded her that she wasn't alone. Slowly, painfully, she began reclaiming pieces of herself. When Harmony finally decided to share her story, it wasn't just an act of courage, it was an act of defiance. She knew the risks. She knew some people wouldn't believe her. She knew her family, her church, and her community might fracture under the weight of her truth. But she also knew one thing for certain: staying silent wasn't an option anymore. What's remarkable about Harmony isn't just her bravery. It's her humanity. Despite everything she endured, she never lost sight of the fact that she deserved better. That she deserved justice. That she deserved to live a life free from fear. Her story reminds us of something powerful. Healing doesn't happen overnight. It's messy, painful, and non-linear, but it's also possible. And sometimes the hardest step toward healing is simply saying the words aloud. This happened to me. Harmony did more than survive. She chose to thrive, to break free, to shine a light where there had only been darkness. And that's why her story matters. Not just for her, but for anyone who's ever felt silenced, powerless, or unseen. Every journey toward justice begins with a single step, a moment when silence gives way to courage. For Harmony Oates, that moment came during a conversation with someone she trusted. It might have been a close friend, a counselor, or even a stranger who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Whoever it was, they listened. Not just with their ears, but with their heart. And when Harmony finally spoke the words she'd kept buried for so long, something inside her shifted. That person didn't just offer comfort, they encouraged her to take the next step, to report what had happened to the authorities. It wasn't an easy decision. In fact, it was terrifying. But Harmony knew one thing for certain. Staying silent meant letting the abuse win. So with trembling hands and a heart full of resolve, she walked into the unknown, setting off a chain reaction that would change everything. What followed was a painstaking process, an investigation that peeled back layers of secrecy and exposed the truth hidden beneath years of lies. Law enforcement moved quickly but carefully, knowing how delicate cases like this can be. Detectives began by listening to Harmony's account, piecing together a timeline of events that spanned over a decade. From there, they expanded their search, gathering every shred of evidence they could find. Testimonies from family members, friends, and churchgoers painted a fuller picture of Bailey's behavior. Physical evidence, though often difficult to obtain in cases of prolonged abuse, was meticulously collected and analyzed. Digital records, including emails, text messages, and social media interactions, provided additional insight into the dynamics between Harmony and her father. It was a slow, grueling process, but each piece of evidence brought them closer to the truth. Every document, every witness statement, every detail mattered, because in cases like this, the devil isn't just in the details. It's the details themselves that bring justice within reach. As word of the allegations spread, the impact rippled far beyond Harmony and her family. The news hit the Tulsa community like a thunderclap, leaving shock and disbelief in its wake. How could this happen? How could a man who preached love and forgiveness be capable of such cruelty? For many in the congregation, the accusations felt like a betrayal. Not just of Harmony, but of everything they believed in. St. Andrew Christian Church, once a beacon of hope and unity, became a house divided. Some members stood firmly behind Bailey, refusing to believe the charges against him. Others were torn, caught between loyalty to their pastor and the growing weight of the evidence. And then there were those who rallied around Harmony, offering support and solidarity as she navigated the storm. Outside the church, the scandal dominated conversations across Tulsa. Neighbors whispered about it over backyard fences. Parents wondered if their own children were safe. Local news outlets covered every development, amplifying the tension and forcing the entire city to confront uncomfortable questions about trust, faith, and accountability. But perhaps the hardest part wasn't the public reaction. It was the private fallout. Friendships fractured, families splintered. People who had known each other for years suddenly found themselves on opposite sides of an emotional battlefield. Even within Harmony's own family, the divisions ran deep. Some relatives rallied around her, horrified by what she had endured and determined to see justice served. Others, however, sided with Bailey, either out of denial, fear, or misplaced loyalty. The rifts cut like knives, leaving wounds that would take years to heal if they ever did. Through it all, Harmony remained steadfast. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. She knew not everyone would believe her, but she also knew something else. The truth doesn't need permission to exist. It simply is. And now, thanks to her bravery, the truth was finally coming to light. The discovery phase wasn't just about uncovering evidence. It was about exposing the cracks in a system that had allowed this abuse to continue unchecked for so long. It was about holding up a mirror to a community and asking, how did we let this happen? Because sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we need to hear the most. By the time investigators pieced everything together, the evidence was undeniable. Text messages revealed chilling conversations that painted a disturbing picture of control and manipulation. Witness statements from family members, friends and churchgoers corroborated Harmony's account, adding layers of credibility to her story. And then there were the forensic findings, cold and clinical but impossible to ignore. Together, these pieces formed a mosaic of truth that no amount of denial could dismantle. On September insert data 2024, the unthinkable happened. Bertheophilus Maurice Bailey, the man who had stood at the pulpit for years, preaching love and righteousness, was arrested. The moment itself was surreal. Officers arrived at his home, handcuffs glinting in the morning light as they led him away. Neighbors watched from behind curtains, their faces etched with disbelief. How could this be happening? The news spread like wildfire, leaving Tulsa reeling. Some were horrified but not surprised, quietly admitting they'd suspected something wasn't right. Others refused to believe it, clinging to the image of Bailey as a godly man incapable of such atrocities. Social media erupted, with debates raging between those who supported Harmony and those who defended Bailey. It was chaos, but also clarity. The arrest forced everyone to confront the reality that monsters often wear masks. When Bailey appeared in court, he didn't flinch. He stood tall, defiant and unapologetic. Despite the mountain of evidence against him, he pleaded not guilty, claiming the allegations were fabricated or exaggerated. His defense team wasted no time crafting their strategy, poking holes in witness testimonies and questioning the reliability of digital evidence. They painted Harmony as confused, vindictive or misled, a tactic as predictable as it was painful. But here's the thing about denial. It doesn't change the truth. No matter how loudly Bailey protested, the facts remained. The text messages, the witnesses, the forensic findings. Each one whispered the same thing. This happened. Still, Bailey's defiance sent shockwaves through the community. For some, it deepened their doubts. Could a man so confident in his innocence really be guilty? For others, it confirmed what they already suspected, that he would fight tooth and nail to protect himself, even if it meant dragging his own daughter through the mud. Through it all, Harmony remained resolute. She knew the battle ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew this. Justice isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. And she wasn't backing down. Fallout from Bailey's arrest wasn't just legal, it was deeply personal. His family, once the picture of unity, fractured under the weight of the scandal. Some relatives clung to him, convinced of his innocence or unwilling to face the truth. Others stood firmly by Harmony, their hearts breaking for the pain she endured. The rifts ran deep. Awkward silences at family gatherings turned into outright arguments, relationships splintered beyond repair. For those caught in the middle, it was agonizing. How do you choose between loyalty to a father and justice for a sister? There were no easy answers, only sleepless nights and heavy hearts. Inside St. Andrew Christian Church, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. What had once been a sanctuary now felt like a battleground. Congregants wrestled with conflicting emotions, betrayal, anger, disbelief. Some walked away from the church altogether, unable to reconcile their faith with the actions of its leader. Others stayed, clinging to the belief that Bailey was innocent, or that forgiveness should transcend even the gravest sins. Heated debates erupted over coffee after services. Was this a test of faith? A failure of leadership? Or something darker lurking beneath the surface all along? The divide spilled into the community too. Neighbors whispered, friends argued, and social media lit up with opinions. At the center of it all was one unshakable question. How could someone so trusted become so accused? Meanwhile, the media descended on Tulsa like a storm. Local news outlets gave way to national coverage as reporters dug deeper into Bailey's past. Investigative pieces explored his rise to prominence, his relationships within the church, and whether there had been warning signs, whispers or red flags missed or ignored. Each new revelation added fuel to the fire, keeping the case in the public eye and intensifying the scrutiny on everyone involved. And then came the most chilling possibility of all. Were there other victims? Investigators began reaching out, piecing together fragments of stories that pointed to a pattern. If true, the scope of Bailey's alleged crimes would widen, amplifying the shockwaves already rippling through Tulsa. For Harmony, this raised a haunting question. Had she been the only one brave enough to speak up, or just the first? Through it all, the story became more than just about one man or one family. It was about power, trust, and accountability. It forced people to confront uncomfortable truths. That predators often hide where we least expect them, that silence can enable abuse, and that faith itself can be twisted into a weapon. But amid the chaos, something else emerged, a glimmer of hope. Survivors began finding their voices, inspired by Harmony's courage. Conversations started, not just about what happened, but about how to prevent it from happening again. Because sometimes the hardest moments lead to the most meaningful change. And in Tulsa, the reckoning had only just begun. The courtroom became the stage for one of the most intense battles Tulsa had ever seen. Every motion, every word, every glance carried weight as the prosecution and defense clashed over a case that had already shaken the community to its core. It began with pre-trial motions, legal chess moves designed to shape the narrative before opening statements even started. The prosecution aimed to keep the focus squarely on the evidence, the text messages, witness testimonies, and forensic findings that painted a damning picture of Theophilus Bailey. They argued this wasn't just a family matter. It was a criminal act, plain and simple. The defense, however, fought back fiercely. Their strategy: sow doubt. They questioned the reliability of digital records, challenged the credibility of witnesses, and painted Harmony as someone acting out of resentment or confusion. Character witnesses took the stand, describing Bailey as a devoted pastor, loving father, and pillar of the community. The tension in the room was palpable. How do you reconcile these two versions of the same man? When opening statements began, both sides laid their cards on the table. The prosecution told a story of manipulation, control, and abuse, a predator hiding behind a mask of piety. The defense countered with tales of faith, service, and decades of goodwill, urging the jury to see Bailey not as a monster, but as a misunderstood man caught in a storm of accusations. Then came the cross-examinations, the moments where tensions reached a boiling point. Expert witnesses were called to testify, from psychologists who explained the long-term effects of childhood trauma to digital forensic specialists who authenticated the damning text messages. Each side worked tirelessly to either bolster Harmony's claims or dismantle them. But nothing compared to the moment when Harmony herself stepped into the witness box. Her victim impact statement wasn't just words. It was a raw, unfiltered account of the pain she'd carried for years. She spoke of sleepless nights, shattered trust, and the constant struggle to reclaim her sense of self-worth. Her voice trembled at times, but her resolve never wavered. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even those skeptical of her story couldn't deny the authenticity of her suffering. For many, it was a turning point. This wasn't just about legal arguments anymore. It was about a human being who had endured unimaginable pain. And as Harmony walked back to her seat, the weight of her courage hung heavy in the air. The defense didn't let up. They attacked her testimony relentlessly, questioning inconsistencies and probing for weaknesses. They brought in character witnesses, friends, colleagues, former congregants, all singing Bailey's praises. A man of God, they called him. A leader, a mentor, a friend. Yet, no matter how polished their arguments seemed, they couldn't erase the glaring contradictions. How could a man so devoted to his faith commit such acts of cruelty? And why would Harmony risk everything to lie about it? These questions lingered in the minds of everyone watching. As the trial wore on, the tension between the two narratives grew almost unbearable. On one side stood Harmony, a survivor fighting for justice and healing. On the other stood Bailey, clinging to his innocence while his defense team worked overtime to cast doubt on her story. It was a battle not just of facts, but of perception. Was Bailey a predator hiding in plain sight, or a scapegoat caught in a web of lies? And through it all, the jury listened, carefully, silently, weighing every piece of evidence, every argument, every tear shed in that courtroom. Because in the end, it would be their decision that defined the outcome, not just for Harmony and Bailey, but for an entire community holding its breath. The wait was agonizing. After weeks of testimony, arguments, and emotional testimonies, the fate of Berthia Phyllis Bailey now rested in the hands of 12 strangers. The jury filed out of the courtroom to begin deliberations, their faces unreadable masks. For Harmony, for her family, for the entire community, time seemed to stand still. Behind closed doors, the jurors wrestled with the weight of their decision. They pored over evidence, revisited witness statements, and debated every angle of the case. Was the prosecution's argument strong enough to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt? Or had the defense succeeded in planting seeds of doubt? Reaching unanimity wasn't easy. Some jurors were convinced by the mountain of evidence. Others hesitated, questioning whether they could truly know what happened behind closed doors. Hours turned into days as the deliberation dragged on. Whispers of a mistrial began circulating. If the jury couldn't agree, the case might slip through the cracks, leaving no resolution for anyone involved. The pressure mounted, not just on them, but on everyone waiting outside those sealed, off walls. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the verdict was ready. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the jury returned, their expressions guarded. Friends, family, reporters, and congregants leaned forward in their seats, holding their breath. When the four persons stood to deliver the decision, you could hear a pin drop. Guilty. Or perhaps not guilty. In that single word, lives would change forever. If the verdict came back guilty, the room erupted, a mix of relief, vindication, and raw emotion. Harmony buried her face in her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. For years, she'd carried this burden alone, silenced by fear and manipulation. Now, finally, there was justice. Outside the courthouse, supporters cheered, hugging one another as news spread. But for Bailey's defenders, the ones who refused to believe, he remained a martyr, wrongfully accused in their eyes. If the verdict came back not guilty, the reaction was equally visceral, but far more devastating for Harmony. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as disbelief settled over her supporters. How could this happen? Hadn't the evidence been clear? For Harmony, it was a gut punch. A reminder that justice isn't guaranteed, even when the truth feels undeniable. Supporters rallied around her, vowing to continue fighting, while critics claimed victory, dismissing the allegations as baseless lies. No matter the outcome, the ripple effects were immediate and profound. Within Harmony's family, old wounds reopened or new ones form. Those who believed her felt vindicated or crushed, depending on the verdict, while those loyal to Bailey doubled down, refusing to accept any version of events that painted him as anything less than perfect. At St. Andrew Christian Church, the divide deepened. Some members left altogether, unable to reconcile their faith with the actions of its former pastor. Others stayed, clinging to forgiveness or denial, determined to rebuild despite the scandal. The wider Tulsa community grappled with the aftermath too. Conversations about accountability, power dynamics, and systemic failures dominated coffee shops, dinner tables, and town halls. For Harmony, though, the verdict was only part of the journey. Whether justice was served or denied, she had already accomplished something extraordinary. She'd spoken her truth. She'd forced the world to confront the darkness hiding beneath a veneer of respectability. And in doing so, she inspired countless others to find their voices too. Because sometimes the verdict isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a much larger reckoning. The echoes of the trial didn't fade once the verdict was read. For St. Andrew Christian Church, the scandal left a scar that would never fully heal. Some congregants stayed, determined to rebuild trust and restore the church's mission. They organized town halls, brought in counselors, and worked tirelessly to create a safer, more transparent community. But others couldn't stay. The betrayal cut too deep. Their faith in both the church and its former pastor irreparably shaken. Empty pews became a silent testament to the toll of broken trust. For those who remained, questions lingered. Could they ever truly move forward, or would this shadow hang over them forever? It wasn't just about Bailey anymore. It was about what his actions revealed about power, accountability, and the systems that allowed such abuse to thrive unchecked for so long. If convicted, Berthia Felis Bailey faced the full weight of justice. Sentenced to decades behind bars, he became another statistic, a cautionary tale of how far someone could fall from grace. Yet even then, the sentence didn't erase the pain he caused. For Harmony, it was validation, but not closure. Knowing her father would spend years in prison didn't undo the trauma or mend the fractures in her family. Still, the ruling sent a message. No one is above the law, not even a man of God. If acquitted, the devastation rippled outward like waves after a stone hits water. For Harmony, it felt like being silenced all over again. Her truth dismissed, her pain invalidated. Other potential victims, emboldened by her courage, might retreat back into the shadows, fearing they'd never be believed either. And for the community, an acquittal raised uncomfortable questions. Had justice failed? Or had doubt overshadowed the truth? Either way, the damage was done. But through it all, Harmony emerged as a beacon of resilience. Her journey wasn't easy. In fact, it was messy, painful, and non-linear. Healing didn't come overnight. Some days, she took 2 steps forward only to feel pushed 3 steps forward, only to feel pushed 3 steps back. But slowly, surely, she began reclaiming pieces of herself. Therapy helped her untangle years of manipulation and self-doubt. Friends and advocates reminded her she wasn't alone, and speaking out gave her a sense of purpose, to ensure no one else suffered in silence. Harmony also became an advocate for survivors of abuse, sharing her story to inspire others to find their voices. She spoke at events, joined support groups, and pushed for systemic changes within religious institutions to prevent similar tragedies. Her advocacy wasn't just about seeking justice. It was about fostering hope, creating safe spaces, and reminding survivors that they are worthy of love, respect, and healing. In the end, the aftermath of Bailey's case wasn't just about one man or one family. It was about a reckoning with power, faith, and the ways we protect, or fail to protect, the vulnerable among us. St. Andrew Christian Church may have been forever changed, but so was Harmony. She transformed her pain into strength, her silence into a rallying cry. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, one thing was clear. She refused to let her past define her future. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is keep moving forward, even when the world feels heavy. This case wasn't just about one family or one church. It was a mirror held up to society, reflecting uncomfortable truths we can no longer afford to ignore. It reminded us of the dangers of unchecked authority, the ways power can be weaponized, and the importance of holding even our most trusted leaders accountable. Abuse thrives in silence and secrecy, but it crumbles under scrutiny and truth-telling. We learn that at institutions, whether religious, educational, or otherwise, must prioritize transparency and safety above all else. Policies matter, but so does culture. A culture where victims feel safe coming forward, where whistleblowers are heard, and where accountability isn't an afterthought, but a cornerstone. And perhaps the most powerful lesson came from Harmony herself. The courage it takes to speak out against someone who holds so much power over you. Her bravery showed us that breaking silence doesn't just free the individual. It opens doors for others to do the same. As this story comes to a close, let's leave you with these final words. A message from Harmony, spoken not just for herself, but for anyone who has ever felt trapped by fear or shame. I didn't think I'd survive this. I didn't think anyone would believe me. But here I am, still standing. If my story helps even one person find their voice, then everything I've been through will have been worth it. You don't have to face this alone. There is hope. People who will fight for you. Her call to action is simple yet profound. Recognize the signs of abuse. Support survivors without judgment. Demand integrity and transparency from those in positions of power. Together, we can create a world where predators can't hide behind titles or trust, and where survivors know they're not alone. Before we go, if stories like this resonate with you, if you believe in amplifying voices that challenge injustice and spark change, we invite you to join us on this journey. Subscribe now to stay connected to more narratives that inspire, educate, and empower, because every story matters and every voice deserves to be heard. Thank you for listening and for being part of the movement toward justice, healing, and hope.